Jesse was born under the vast skies of the Maasai Mara, where the golden savanna stretched endlessly and life followed the rhythm of the wild. His first breaths were taken among the protective embrace of his pride, known as the Chelly Pride. It was a place of strength, where the echoes of roars carried across the plains like ancient songs. The pride was ruled by three powerful males, Ajani, Sham, and Samir lions whose presence commanded respect and whose lineage shaped the destiny of the land. Jesse's early days were filled with playful romps in the tall grass alongside his brother Frank. The two cubs were inseparable, their bond strengthened by the stories their mothers told of their father's reign. The Chelly Pride thrived under the rule of the three kings, and as the sun rose each day, Jesse learned the ways of the wild, mimicking the movements of the older lions. Life in the Pride was safe, a sanctuary from the dangers that lurked beyond the territory's edges. But the safety of cubhood could not last forever. As Jesse and Frank grew, so did the silent understanding that their time in the Chelly Pride was limited. Young males, no matter how cherished, could not remain once they reached maturity. The pride belonged to their fathers, and the cycle of the wild demanded that new kings forge their own paths. By the time Jesse's mane began to darken, the gentle nudges from the older lions became more pronounced. There were fewer moments of rest, more long journeys beyond the heart of the pride's land. The vast expanse of the Mara, once seen only from the safety of his mother's side, now stretched out before him, beckoning him into the unknown. The day eventually came when Jesse and Frank stood on the edge of Chelly Pride's territory. Their fathers watched from a distance, neither encouraging nor stopping them. This was the way of things. The brothers exchanged a glance, and without a word, they stepped forward, leaving behind the land of their birth and the comfort of their youth. The vastness of the Mara opened before them, and with each step, Jesse felt the weight of uncertainty press against him. Frank walked closely at his side, their unspoken bond the only constant in this new and unfamiliar world. The land outside the Chelly Pride's borders felt different, wilder, harsher. There were no mothers to groom them, no fathers to stand between them and danger. For the first time, Jesse realized what it meant to be truly alone. The brothers moved cautiously, their eyes sharp and ears pricked at every sound. The distant roars of unknown males echoed in the distance, a warning that they were intruding on land claimed by others. They were no longer cubs but not yet rulers, nomads without territory, without pride. Every encounter with another lion brought the threat of violence, and Jesse began to understand why so few lone males survived for long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Frank halted suddenly. Ahead, the scent of other lions drifted on the wind. Jesse hesitated. To move forward could mean facing rivals they were not prepared to fight. For a moment, Jesse felt the pull to turn back, to return to the comfort of familiar land. But the pride was no longer theirs, and returning meant submission, a path neither brother was willing to take. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help US Frank stepped forward, his confidence unshaken. Jesse followed, his heart pounding. Together, they crossed the threshold into unfamiliar territory, accepting the risk that lay ahead. Days turned into weeks as Jesse and Frank wandered across the Mara, their bodies leaner but stronger. The brothers had learned to hunt, relying on each other to take down prey and fend off scavengers. Life as nomads was unforgiving, but the bond between them grew unbreakable. One afternoon, as the sun blazed overhead, they stumbled upon a small pride lingering near a shaded grove. The scent of the resident males was faint, old and fading. Jesse and Frank exchanged a glance. This was an opportunity. A pride without strong leaders was vulnerable, and the brothers were no longer cubs looking for safety. The females watched from a distance, tense and ready to defend their young, but there was no sign of dominant males. Jesse stepped forward, his mane catching the wind as he released a low growl. Frank mirrored his brother, standing tall at his side. No challengers appeared. For the first time since leaving the Chelly Pride, they felt the thrill of power. The pride slowly accepted their presence, and over the following days, Jesse and Frank secured their place as the new leaders. This was the offbeat Pride, a small but resilient group that would now carry the brothers' bloodline. Seasons passed, and the Pride flourished. Jesse and Frank fathered cubs, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though their reign would last forever. But the Mara was unforgiving, and peace rarely endured. In the distance, new threats stirred, and the bond that had carried Jesse and Frank this far would soon face its greatest test. The Mara's tranquility was deceptive. Beneath the peaceful facade, danger always loomed, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jesse and Frank had secured the offbeat Pride, but their hold on it was fragile. Rival coalitions prowled nearby, their eyes set on the Pride's lionesses and territory. Frank often led patrols along the edges of their domain, his golden mane glinting under the sun as he marked the boundaries with sharp scratches and scent trails. Jesse, ever watchful, remained close to the lionesses, ensuring the safety of the cubs. The balance of power rested heavily on their unity, two brothers standing together, unchallenged. But fate, as always, had other plans. One morning, as dawn broke over the savannah, Frank disappeared. Jesse's senses were alert to his absence. At first, he assumed his brother had ventured farther than usual. Hours passed, and there was no sign of Frank's return. The lionesses, too, sensed the shift. The absence of one leader left them vulnerable, and Jesse felt the weight of the Pride's survival rest solely on his shoulders. Jesse searched tirelessly, following Frank's faint trail along the outer reaches of their territory. The path led him to a riverbank, where the signs abruptly ended. There were no traces of struggle, no blood, only silence. Frank was gone, swallowed by the vastness of the Mara. For days, Jesse patrolled alone, his calls echoing across the plains without answer. With Frank missing, the delicate balance of power crumbled. Rival males began appearing at the edges of the Pride's territory, their eyes burning with the desire to claim what Jesse and Frank had fought to build. The first confrontation came at dusk. A pair of young males approached, their muscles rippling beneath thickening manes. Jesse met them head-on, his roar shattering the quiet. The lionesses retreated, protecting their cubs from the coming storm. Jesse fought fiercely, his body a blur of power and fury. He drove the intruders back, but the battle left its mark. Deep scratches lined his flank, and the sting of exhaustion lingered long after the rivals disappeared into the grass. It became clear that Jesse could not hold the Pride alone. Without Frank, his reign was doomed to end. The inevitable arrived one evening as the setting sun bathed the plains in gold. A coalition of 3 males descended upon the offbeat Pride, their strength overwhelming. Jesse fought bravely, refusing to yield even as the odds stacked against him. The lionesses watched in silent sorrow, knowing the outcome long before the battle concluded. Bloodied and beaten, Jesse fled into the wilderness, his roars fading behind him. The Pride he once ruled was no longer his. For the first time in years, Jesse was a nomad once more, wandering alone across the Mara. Jesse's return to a nomadic life was harsh and unforgiving. Without the protection of a Pride, every day became a fight for survival. He roamed the vast Mara, his body leaner but his spirit unbroken. The memories of the offbeat Pride haunted him, the warmth of the cubs, the security of his brother's presence, the feeling of ruling his own territory. But the Mara offered no comfort to those who dwelled on the past. Jesse adapted quickly to his new life. He avoided large coalitions, knowing that direct confrontation would mean certain death. Instead, he relied on stealth, scavenging from kills left behind by other predators or hunting alone under the cover of night. His body bore the scars of battles, but his resilience carried him forward. One evening, as Jesse moved quietly through the tall grass, he caught the scent of another lion. His muscles tensed. In his solitude, Jesse had crossed paths with many solitary males like himself. Survivors who, like him, had lost their prides and wandered the plains as nomads. Some encounters ended in tense standoffs, others in brief but vicious skirmishes. This time, Jesse recognized the scent before he saw the lion. Emerging from the shadows was his son, Jesse too. The younger lion was thinner than Jesse remembered, his mane not yet fully grown. His eyes carried the same determination Jesse once saw in his own reflection. Father and son approached cautiously, circling each other with curiosity rather than aggression. Jesse too bore signs of a recent battle, scratches along his flank and a limp that suggested he had barely escaped a fight. Jesse let out a low rumble, not of warning, but recognition. To his surprise, Jesse too responded in kind, lowering his head in a gesture of respect. In that moment, the bond of blood transcended the harsh realities of the wild. For the first time in years, Jesse felt something other than loneliness. For several weeks, father and son traveled together. Jesse taught Jesse too the ways of survival, just as Frank had once guided him. They hunted as a pair, their combined strength enough to bring down larger prey. Jesse too's limp began to fade, and his confidence grew under his father's quiet mentorship. But the Mara was not a place of lasting reunions. One day, Jesse awoke to find Jesse too gone, his tracks leading toward distant hills. There was no sign of struggle, only the path of a lion choosing to continue his own journey. Jesse watched the horizon long after his son had disappeared from sight. Though the reunion was brief, it rekindled something in Jesse, a reminder that his legacy endured, even if he no longer ruled a pride. His daughters in the offbeat pride carried his bloodline, and now his son walked the Mara as well. Alone once more, Jesse pressed on. The Mara stretched endlessly before him, but he faced it not as a broken lion, but as one who had learned to survive against all odds. As the seasons passed, Jesse's mane grew darker and fuller, a testament to the years he had endured as a nomad. His once golden fur now bore the marks of countless battles, scars that told the story of his survival. Though he walked alone, Jesse had become a figure of quiet legend in the Mara. Guides and conservationists whispered stories of the lone lion who roamed the plains without a coalition, defying the odds with each passing year. Jesse's path often led him into dangerous territories, places dominated by younger, stronger males. Yet, his experience allowed him to navigate the perils with caution. He avoided unnecessary fights, relying on stealth to hunt and patience to outlast his rivals. Despite his solitary life, Jesse's reputation as a fighter preceded him. Other nomads rarely challenged him, and younger lions learned to respect his presence from a distance. One evening, as Jesse traversed the border of the Naboisho Conservancy, he encountered a familiar figure. Oloimina, one of the notorious Black Rock Boys, stood across the clearing. The two lions locked eyes, neither moving for several moments. Oloimina, younger and part of a powerful coalition, growled softly, a warning, not a threat. Jesse responded with a low rumble, acknowledging the younger male but showing no sign of retreat. To Jesse's surprise, Oloimina did not advance. Instead, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Jesse to continue his path unchallenged. Such encounters were rare, and Jesse understood the unspoken respect that had passed between them. Even the strongest coalitions recognized the value of avoiding unnecessary conflict with a lion who had nothing to lose. But Jesse's greatest test lay ahead. In early 2023, his wanderings brought him back to the Mara North Conservancy, the land where he had once ruled alongside Frank. The sight of the familiar plains stirred something within him, a sense of longing, perhaps, or the need to reconnect with the land of his youth. The pride that now occupied the area belonged to the Enko-Yonai coalition, a group of 5 powerful males who had carved out a vast territory. Jesse knew the risk of lingering too close, but instinct drew him forward. He watched from a distance, his golden eyes fixed on the pride's lionesses and cubs. This was not his pride, but the sight of the next generation gave him pause. On the evening of July 24, 2023, Jesse's luck finally ran out. 3 of the Enko-Yonai males discovered him near the pride's territory. There was no time to flee. The confrontation erupted beneath the fading light, and Jesse fought with the ferocity of a lion who had survived countless battles. For a brief moment, it seemed as though he might drive them back. But the Enko-Yonai were relentless. Jesse's strength began to wane, and the fight turned against him. Bloodied and exhausted, he stumbled toward a nearby thicket, collapsing beneath the shade of a lone bush. Though he had lost the battle, Jesse's spirit remained unbroken. In the quiet of the Mara, he lay beneath the stars, his breathing shallow but steady. The land he had ruled, fought for, and survived upon cradled him one last time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Mara, Jesse lay quietly beneath the bush, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The distant calls of hyenas echoed faintly, but they did not approach. Even in his weakened state, Jesse's presence commanded a silent respect. The Enko-Yonai males had retreated, leaving him alone beneath the fading light. Jesse's gaze drifted to the sky, where the first stars began to emerge. The cool evening air whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the scents of the savanna. Memories surfaced, unbidden but welcome. He saw the faces of his cubs, the playful nips of his daughters as they tumbled through the grass. He remembered the steady strength of Frank by his side, the weight of their shared reign over the offbeat pride. A distant rustle drew his attention, but Jesse did not rise. His body ached, and exhaustion pressed heavily upon him. Still, his heart remained steady, unwilling to surrender to the inevitability of his condition. Throughout the night, Jesse's mind drifted between the present and the past. He saw Frank again, standing at the edge of a riverbank, his golden mane glinting in the sunlight. Jesse stepped forward, but the image faded, replaced by the quiet emptiness of the plains around him. As dawn approached, Jesse stirred. His strength was fleeting, but he pressed forward, rising to his feet with a low grunt. He limped toward a shaded cluster of trees, each step deliberate and slow. There was no destination, only the need to keep moving. By midday, Jesse had settled beneath the shade of an acacia tree, the savanna stretching endlessly before him. A soft breeze ruffled his mane, and he closed his eyes, allowing the warmth of the sun to wash over him. In that moment, Jesse was not a lion defeated by battle, but a king surveying the land he had once ruled. For several days, Jesse lingered near the acacia tree, drawing what strength he could from the land. Occasionally, scavengers circled at a distance, but none dared to approach. His daughters, now leaders of the offbeat pride, roamed the plains not far from where he rested, unaware of their father's silent vigil. On the morning of July 28th, Jesse lay quietly beneath the acacia as the first light touched the horizon. His breathing slowed, and as the wind whispered through the grass, Jesse took his final breath. The Mara, ever watchful, seemed to pause. The land had shaped him, tested him, and now it cradled him in his final moments. Jesse's story did not end with his passing. His daughters carried his bloodline forward, and his legacy lived on in the cubs that roamed the savanna. The tale of the nomad king who defied the odds, ruled with strength, and faced the wild alone became part of the Mara's eternal narrative. In the quiet heart of the plains, Jesse's spirit lingered, one with the land he had called home. In the days following Jesse's passing, the Mara continued its unbroken rhythm, life pressing forward as it always had. The lionesses of the offbeat pride moved across the plains, their cubs trailing closely behind, unaware of the silent sentinel who had watched over them from the shadows. Jesse's daughters led the pride with the same resilience their father had carried through his nomadic years. Though they never saw him in his final moments, his influence was etched into their very survival. The Enko-Yonai coalition, responsible for Jesse's final battle, roamed the land unchallenged. Yet, even among them, there lingered an unspoken respect for the lion they had brought down. Jesse had faced them alone, without fear or hesitation, and such courage left an imprint not easily forgotten. Guides and conservators who had followed Jesse's journey mourned his loss. For years, they had chronicled his rise and fall, capturing his image as he crossed the Mara, a solitary figure against the vast landscape. His story became part of the lore passed down to those who visited the conservancies, a tale of resilience that transcended the simple life of a lion. As the seasons shifted, new cubs were born into the offbeat pride, grandchildren of Jesse. their small frames tumbling through the grass as they chased butterflies and pounced on shadows. The spirit of the pride felt different, touched by the echoes of the lion who had once ruled alongside Frank. One of Jesse's daughters, a lioness named Mara, carried the fire of her father's spirit. She led hunts with precision and ferocity, her presence commanding the respect of the pride. Those who observed her often noted the similarities, her piercing gaze, the subtle way she stood tall against the wind, as if channeling the strength of the lion who had shaped her destiny. Mara gave birth to a litter of cubs during the height of the dry season. Among them was a male whose coat bore a faint golden hue, strikingly similar to Jesse's as a young cub. The guides called him Jesse's legacy, a reminder that the cycle of the Mara endures, and the bloodline of the nomad king still roamed the land. Though Jesse's time had ended, his influence stretched far beyond the pride he once led. Other nomadic males, inspired by his resilience, continued to wander the plains alone, their stories unfolding in the same way Jesse's had, marked by loss, survival, and the endless pursuit of purpose. His name became a quiet legend whispered by those who watched lions under the vast African sky. The Mara, with its sprawling plains and golden sunsets, had given rise to many kings, but Jesse's story stood apart, not as one of dominance, but of perseverance. In the quiet hours of dawn, as the first light crept over the savannah, a lone lion's roar often echoed across the plains. To those who listened closely, it was not just the sound of a rival staking his claim, but the memory of Jesse, the king who walked alone, yet left behind a legacy that would never fade. Seasons passed, and Jesse's daughters thrived, leading the offbeat pride with the quiet strength inherited from their father. Among the pride's cubs, one stood apart, a male with a golden hue reminiscent of Jesse's younger days. Guides called him Jesse's legacy, recognizing the spirit of the nomad king in the young lion's stride. As Jesse's legacy grew, he began to test the pride's boundaries, often wandering farther than the others. His ventures led to small skirmishes with young rivals, and each time he returned with new scars. Mara, Jesse's eldest daughter, watched him closely but offered no resistance. She understood his restlessness, the same desire that had driven Jesse into the wild. One evening, Jesse's legacy did not return. His tracks vanished beyond the pride's land, stretching toward the open plains. Mara stood at the edge of the savannah, watching the horizon but sensing no loss. This was the way of things, the cycle continuing as Jesse's grandson embarked on his journey alone. Far from the pride, beneath the same stars that had guided Jesse, his grandson roamed, carrying not just the strength of youth but the spirit of the lion who had shaped his lineage. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us